Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we want to talk about this upcoming new moon and also the general the general tenor of things, especially in this country, in the U.S. There's an article in one of the leading papers, I forget if it was the Times or the Wall Street Journal, that the country was panicking because of the election being so close and the election being so consequential. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in politically. Of course, we're also in the midst of our own lives, and that's very important. That's maybe the most important, but it's all part of the same big picture, isn't it? So let me go ahead and transition to looking at the chart. Should be able to see the chart here now. So I really wanted to talk about this chart in particular because it is very important and very consequential, just because of the strength of the outer planet connections that it makes. So we're looking as usual at the chart with the Aries sort of artificially on the horizon line. We don't want to be particular to any part of the country, so we won't use the actual ascendant here on the West Coast or in Washington, D.C. We could, but we'll just use the natural houses. And one thing that really stands out, and it's really kind of the most consequential in a way, is Mars at 29 degrees. Now that's a special degree, the last degree of a sign. The next degree would be 0 of Leo. Well, Mars sitting here at 29 degrees of Cancer, opposed to Pluto, you see, at 29 degrees of Capricorn. So partile or same degree opposition between Mars and Pluto is significant. It does bring out the Pluto, it does bring out the Mars. They say that outbursts of anger would be possible, outbursts of angst would be possible. There's a passion involved. It might be just the joy of life, being emphasized, having Mars like that, but having Mars with Pluto, it brings out the dark side of it. What's under the covers, the unconscious, Pluto rules what is deep within us. So it is, the prescription is to avoid anger. The prescription is to, you can't avoid it, but if you do get triggered, recognize where that comes from. I have a friend that says, a psychologist who says, we're never angry for the reason that we think we are. Something triggers us. It could be a close family member, it could be a partner, it could be parent-child situation. And, once that happens, we tend to lose our cool, we tend to lose our reasoning ability. And I don't know what the alarm bell is that goes off for you, but it is important to try to recognize that bubbling up and to just say, I might be about to say or do something I will later regret. So what we say about that is, it's time to take stock. It's time to take a step backward, they say. Don't step towards the triggering influence. Step back from it. Count to 10. That's famous, famous old saying, count to 10. You could, another thing that's very possible to do and very practical to do is just to say, you know what, I need to take a little break. It's always good to say when you'll be back. If something's getting hot between people, there's a abandonment that can seem to take place if you just say, I'm leaving now. So it's good if you could say, I'm leaving now, but I'll be back in 5 minutes, or I'm just going to take a little walk and talk about this when I get back. I can't talk about this right now. I need to think about it. Let's take a break, or let's reflect, or let's count to 10, or, you could even say, can I call you back? If it's on the phone, you can even say, can I call you back? Something just came up. So, anyway, whatever technique you use, it is really recommended in this timing, and this is the new moon right at the beginning of the month, at almost 6 a.m. on the West Coast, 9 a.m. on the East Coast, November 1st. And it will be the configuration for the next 30 days. That's what we will have this month. And so it's very important the whole month that we recognize this and just try to be aware of it. And the other thing being transformation. So when transformation comes, when Pluto comes calling, and if you have something at 0 degrees of a fixed sign right next door here. If you have something at 29 degrees of a sign, it's likely that Pluto will be influencing that factor in your chart. And you might want to be aware of that. Whatever place that you're in transformation, you may want to pause and reflect. Is this in my best interest? The change that seems to be coming down. Because sometimes we don't recognize it at the moment. The cliche there is somebody gets fired from a job that they really couldn't stand or that they were having a lot of problems with. And maybe that's contributing to how they got fired. But they might say, this is the worst day of my life, I just got fired. 10 years later, looking back, they may say, that was the best day of my life when I got fired. So anyway, just to say, don't be too eager to take full responsibility for everything all by yourself. Remember, the universe has its part to play, and it's a co-creator, isn't it, with us. So there's, you're not the only one driving this bus. And you can, taking a philosophical attitude is wonderful if you can do it. You can just say, well, I don't know what this is about, but it happened, didn't it? And so maybe there's a bright side to it, or silver lining, to the clouds. And just try to be philosophical, try to say, well, we'll make the best of it. And just try to not let it get to you, because sometimes the worst effect can be as it hits you psychologically. So that's a long description of this Mars-Pluto opposition, but it is very strong, very powerful, and I did want to make sure to mention it, and to go into a little bit of what we can do in our own self-defense. Now, the other thing that's quite interesting is that Mars participates not only in this opposition to Pluto, but there's a grand trine at 29 degrees, 28 degrees, and 27 degrees between Mars, Mercury, and Neptune. So this brings Neptune into the picture very clearly. And you can see in this chart, we're putting Neptune in the first house, even though it's at 27 degrees. We're putting Mercury, of course, too, in the Sagittarius house, 2 degrees away from 0 degrees Sag. So close enough to the cusp of this house, even though they're whole sign houses. And in the Time Passages software, those are all optional. So let me just show you that you can take the preference for display options, and you can set it, as I have, to a 3-degree house margin, saying that, if it's conjunct the house, it's going to be affecting the next house, because the house cusp itself is a sensitive point really governing that house, the beginning of that house. And you can apply it to whole sign houses if you choose. If you don't, see, they'll line up where they belong in the zodiac, which is before this point in time. And people do get confused about this sometimes, because we're representing the position as being in the next house, but I think it's very important to recognize that it can be thought of as not so much part of, this would be the 8th house of this chart, but really the 9th house is involved. And of course, in a couple days, Mercury will transit into Sagittarius anyway, but just being on the cusp in this new moon, we do consider it to be also a 9th house item here, and you can look at it as both, but don't forget that it really can apply to the 9th house, that Neptune in this chart could apply to the Aries house, wherever the Aries house is for yourself. If you are in Aries, Neptune could be affecting you, is very close to the nodal axis as well, which is in Aries, of course, the North Node. So I think Aries are going to be feeling. Now, what do they feel when they feel a little Neptune going on? They might feel a spiritual inclination. They might feel an inclination to not so much be concerned about the physical 3D world of events and schedules and chores and all that, but there is a beyond to it. There is a spiritual side, a mystical side to things. We have a soul as well as a body. Our soul can go traveling, can it not? So we do have to recognize that there is more to happening than we can see and feel and hear with our senses. And it's all around us, and it's very true, and there's synchronicity, and there's psychic connection, and there's telepathy between people, and all that is happening at the same time. So tuning into that part of the world is something that's part of this whole cycle, especially with Aries, perhaps because of being also in a grand trine with the ruler of Aries, which is Mars. And Mercury, see, so it's our thought process Can also get a little confused. It can be deception. Because Neptune goes beyond the physical, beyond the 3D world, it's not very comfortable when you're trying to deal with the affairs of the 3D world. So one thing we say with Neptune also is we do say could be illusions, could be over-idealization, could be just being kind of adrift and not knowing how to put your one foot ahead of the other in what you're trying to accomplish. So all of that is more than possible with these outer planet connections that we have in this new moon, which also includes Uranus, by the way. So Pluto is very triggered by, or very prominent in the fact that it is opposite Mars. It's also, by the way, square to this new planet, Haumea, which is having to do with internal moral principle and also connection to nature. So connection to nature could be something that comes up now as far as maybe your life is transforming in some way that's related to it. You are feeling the connection to nature, to creatures, other creatures on the planet, to everybody else, a sense of fairness. That's the internal moral principle of just telling the truth and being kind of aware that that's important. And that is a powerful T-square that we've been seeing active in our culture right now, because a lot of it is about, are you telling the truth? Can you get away with not telling the truth, or is there some consequence? So that's a big it's a very big deal right now in what's going on in the political place, also, the political agendas, and in this big election cycle where it's so close that we don't know who's going to win, really, And we don't know also how it'll play out after the election. We know that if the Electoral College goes to Trump, he will be sworn in as president. But if the Electoral College goes to Kamala Harris, there will be great objections on the Republican side. They're already talking about how they won't really certify an election that Trump doesn't win, because that wouldn't make any sense. So they're looking again for the evidence, which they didn't find last time, but they sure, It was said that the last election, 2020, was fraudulent, but there was never any evidence presented. And certainly some people say that there really is none. It was just like a notion on the part of the Republicans that maybe they didn't lose. Maybe they could just win, even though the count didn't go their way. So that could be happening again, as we all, I think, know and are prepared for. And that gets back to this issue of lying. It gets back to this issue of trying to tell the truth, trying to be fair-minded, try not to cheat people, try to be doing to others as you would like to be treated yourself. That's kind of the golden rule. And that comes up in this particular interaction. But we also have, as I say, Neptune very prominent, being part of this grand trine. Now, how is Uranus part of it too? Well, Uranus it turns out at 25 degrees of Taurus is a very close sesquiquadrate to the 10-degree Libra mark, which is the other of these new nature planets, which is called Makemake. So this is the symbol I use for Haumea. This is the symbol I use for Makemake, and that is connected very closely to Uranus, which is also, by the way, in a quintile with Saturn. If you put the mouse on in the time passages software, you can read it off at the bottom there. You probably can't see it, it's very small, but it says Saturn in quintile, 1 degree with Uranus. So a 1 degree quintile is more, a closer aspect is more powerful, more of a connection, sings louder. And we do have this happening with those two, and then also, if you think about it, this opposition from Taurus to Scorpio, 25, 53, almost 26 degrees to the 28 degree mark. That's a pretty close opposition to also to Mercury. So we do have two oppositions active, one same degree, one a couple of degrees off. Uranus is definitely part of this whole picture of outer planet being activated, and we can see it in the headlines, we can feel it in our lives. These are very dicey times, very kind of difficult times. We also have the Scorpio New Moon, which I haven't mentioned, being at 9 degrees of Scorpio. It doesn't connect to too much of these things, but it does connect. It's a trine to Saturn at 12 degrees of Pisces. So Saturn comes into, just to put a little icing on the cake, if you could imagine that kind of a bitter icing. And we can also think about the fact that Chiron and Eris are also in conjunction. They're going to stay in these relatively similar places. The midpoint is 22 and a half right now, and this new moon will be 22 later in the month when Mercury retrogrades. Now, Mercury is getting ready to retrograde. On the 25th of November, it'll be at 22 degrees of Sag at that point, all the way over here. But that's where it stands still in the sky, goes back until mid-December, and then there's the post-retrograde shadow till the end of the year. So Mercury is going to be slowing down, getting to this 22-degree mark on the 25th. And at that point, it will be exactly trine to this midpoint of Chiron and Uranus, which just speaks of knowing that there's such a thing as inner wounding, knowing that we may recognize that it affects us, that it is, our early conditioning sometimes creates that pattern of a wound with a particular area of life. It could be with parental authority, it could be peer-to-peer, and therefore affect relationships. Depending on where Chiron is in your natal chart, you can see how it connects to the personal planets, and that gives you a clue about that. So that really what I'm saying is that this Mercury retrograde is going to be particularly significant when it comes to 22 degrees for the last half of November, and then the first half of December it's moving backwards, the last half of December it's recovering. So it's a pretty strong Mercury retrograde. And while we're on the subject of retrogrades, Mars is also getting ready to station very soon in December, on December 6th. It will station apparently at exactly 6 degrees of Leo. And so it's slowing down right now. Normally, Mars moves about a half a degree a day. It takes about 2 days for Mars to move 1 degree. It takes about 1 day for the Sun or Venus to move 1 degree. Well, now it's moving at about a quarter of a degree. Slows down, slows down, slows down. So toward the end of the month, it's moving very slowly. And then it gets to the 0 degree mark. Here it is at 29 already, but by the election day on the 5th, it's only at 0. So it gets to 0 degrees of Leo on the election day, the 5th of November, and it will be at that point opposite Pluto, not yet in 0 degrees Aquarius, which doesn't happen until the 19th. It crosses into 0 degrees Aquarius. But it will be that opposition even stronger in the sense that at that point it'll be squaring this Haumea position at 1 degree or 2 degrees of Scorpio. So it's a pretty powerful time, including the fact that having slowed down as much as it has, it becomes one of these stronger planets because it's moving slowly. So that's a very powerful T-square on election day with Mercury about to retrograde, and the whole period between November 5th and January 6th, I think, will be quite a zoo with claims and counterclaims of who's the winner. So we will be seeing that, and the struggle for certification of the vote is what I see happening and coming up. Because when Pluto retrogrades on December 6th, that's when it starts moving backwards, and it gets to 1 degree of Leo, which will be right across from 1 degree of Aquarius, where Pluto will be, and that's making this T-square even more perfect on about January 3rd, as we come into the January 6th date, which is, again, this year, this next year in 2025, as it was in 2021, the key date for when the Electoral College vote becomes official, becomes certified, becomes the law of the land, you could say, becomes the victory of whichever candidate. And so that's going to be a struggle on the part of the Republicans. Let's just say if they lose the Electoral College, that will be quite a struggling time, and that's what I see coming. So there you have it as far as election predictions. And I think that's about all I wanted to say. Quite a strong new moon that we have going. We don't want to forget how strong these energies are and how much we have to try to do our bit, try to do our part in staying as calm as possible. Just taking it, it's important to realize that the universe has our back. That's so important right now. So let's transition back to where we were before and close by saying, good luck with it all. Really, I'm hoping everything will be as good as it can be. It's a dicey time, these next couple of months. And so we'll all just do the best we can, try to deal with our highest intentions for ourselves, our higher angels, and keep on keeping on. Good luck with all that. Take care.